Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 16 of Giro d'Italia. Now this is going to be a spectacular stage at 202 kilometers long, over 125 miles, and 3 categorized climbs. The first one of today's stage is about 20 kilometers long, just under 7%. And then the next 2 monster climbs, the Mortirolo at 12 kilometers, just under 8%, is a monster climb and has history here at the Giro d'Italia. The last climb in today's stage, also a category 1. Again, 12 kilometers at 8%. That's going to summit with about 6 kilometers to go before the stage finishes. All downhill into the finish of today's stage after that last category climb. Now, I said there was 3. Really, there's 4. That's what they had, 3 categorized climbs. But there's a 4th one that comes just before the final climb. That's 5 kilometers at 8%. And they didn't even bother categorizing it, and it's a monster of a climb. Super narrow, super steep, super difficult course today on stage 15 of the Giro d'Italia. Now, when the racing starts, the breakaway that starts all the action off is going to be about 6 guys. Matthew van der Poel's in there. Mark Cavendish is in the front group. Jumbo-Visma's represented with Pascal Ankhorn and Thomas de Hent from Lotto Soudal's in there. AG2R's represented from Nans Peters, and Chris Juliansen from Bike Exchange to round out that front group. Now, the problem is behind, nobody's happy with this because they know today is a day for the breakaway specialists because Ineos want to protect the general classification. They're not necessarily interested in winning the stage. So those 5 guys, they'll hold about a 45-second gap, and then once we start climbing the first monster climb here on stage 16, it's going to be a teams tacking all over the place back there. Trek Segafredo will be making splits left and right. Now when we see the big group behind, it's about 10 guys, 15 guys back there with Trek Segafredo driving it like crazy. They'll group up with the front group of 6, and then we'll see Matthew van der Poel stage 16 ends as he drops out of the group. Now behind the peloton back there is trying to be controlled by Ineos, but groups upon groups are attacking left and right. And finally up front, the group is 25-ish riders, thereabouts. It's changing all the time, and there's so much action happening on today's stage. There's no way I can remember everybody that's in that front group, but UAE Team Emirates is up there with Davide Formula, and that's why I brought up the Lotto jerseys here for you guys, so I can tell you a story. Because during the Tour de France, 2 years with Lotto Soudal, I was the second best climber on the team because Cadel Evans was the best, and he was racing for the general classification. Now, much like UAE Team Emirates is here, right? Almost identical. We won the green jersey with Robbie McEwen, so we had our team split up with riders riding for Robbie McEwen, and Cadel Evans, when we got into the deep mountains, really only had myself and Van Sumeren. Van Sumeren could get up normally to the penultimate climb and possibly over that from time to time. But in general, I was the last guy that Cadel Evans would have left to help him on the finishing climb of whatever stage of the Tour de France it was for both those 2 years. So when I look at UAE Team Emirates with Davide Formula up there, and I look back in the peloton and see Almeida back there isolated and left alone, because it doesn't matter how many teammates he has with him at this point in time. What really matters is when all the favorites start attacking at the finishing climb of today's stage 16, that Davide Formula is there to at least close one big gap. Remember, we've seen in all the earlier stages, on the mountain stages anyways, that Almeida is always left isolated and having to chase all by himself, and nothing's going to change on today's 16 because Almeida is going to have to put in big work if he wants to stay on the podium at the end of this stage 16. Now up front, that group of 25 guys, when they came off the first ascent, they get down to the bottom of the flat valley here, and there's going to be chaos back there because everybody is trying to get feeds from the car. When I was racing the Tour de France, when you get to the bottom of these descents, it's always mass chaos. There would always be time right before the top of the climbs normally to go back and get some bottles, hand them to Cadel Evans, then drop down the descents, then mass chaos like we're viewing here on today's stage 16, where everybody needs their car up there at the same time. That group up there, we'll call it about 25 riders strong, is working fairly well together, and the last 2 riders to attach onto that group through the valley be Wilco Kelderman from Bora Hansgrohe and Bias from Drone Hopper. Now those 2 riders closing that gap. Shortly after that, we're going to see Guillaume Martin have a bike exchange. He's going to get back up to the front group, and then there's going to be a split A good size split with DSM riders on the front. They got Arensman in that front group and Chris Hamilton. I mistaken Hamilton's name yesterday on the butterfly effect on Beyond the Coverage. I said Chris Hamilton when I actually meant Lucas Hamilton, but today it's Chris Hamilton on the front for DSM, and he's driving this group like a monster because he's got favorites in there, and Arensman, who was up on the general classification early in this Giro d'Italia, is looking pretty solid on today's stage. So DSM have a lot of motivation. Alejandro Valverde, the 42-year-old veteran's in the front group. He made the split. He's coming through, and he wants this group to survive. Now behind, we're going to see EF Education's Hugh Carthy, and he's frustrated with the group. They didn't actually show on television how this group separated. I assume there was just a little bit of pause or hesitation somewhere, and that group up front, almost a peloton, splits in half with DSM driving it hard on the pedals. Next up, the Mortirolo climb at 85 kilometers to go. Leonard Kamna, Koen Bouwman, Valverde, Arensman, and Chris Hamilton, like I said, pulling like crazy. The second group behind with EF Education's Hugh Carthy, Jan Hertz, Ciccone, Trek Segafredo. Those three riders are trying to make it up to the front group, and they're working well together as best as they can. But Ciccone, who earlier in today's stage was back at the medical car getting something done to his hand, he's not going to be on the best of form today here on stage 16 like he was when he won stage 15. That group of six still has a 40-second gap on the chasers behind. The peloton, being led by Ineos, has been fairly calm throughout the stage and allowing about a 4 or 5 minute gap up to the front favorites trying to vie for today's stage win. Now behind up to Mortirolo is going to be Astana taking the front. Now the Kazakhstan team, they're trying to get Vincenzo Nibali a stage win, if not trying to move him up on the general classification, because we've seen some fine form out of Vincenzo Nibali. Ineos are directly on the wheel, and up front, Hugh Carthy, Jan Hertz has dropped Ciccone, the Trek Segafredo rider, and now they're bridging up to the leaders here on stage 16 as they crest the KOM. They still got a gap on all the favorites behind, the GC favorites that is. But taking over the top for Astana is going to be Vincenzo Nibali over the top of the KOM. And now he's going over the top, bombing down the descent. He's causing a split back there in the GC favorites and trying to go solo here on stage 16. This is absolutely ridiculous, guys. It's still too early. There's no way you can close 3-4 minute gap up to that group up in front. And there's no way you can hold off an Ineos team from behind. This just doesn't make any sense. Now he has a little bit of help because Richie Porte has a problem back there. The Ineos rider will find his way back up to the front because Richard Carapaz closed the gap up to Vincenzo Nibali, the Astana rider. Now, when I'm sitting on the couch, there's no way this can work, because even when Richard Carapaz gets up there to Vincenzo Nibali, he's not going to pull with the Astana rider because he has no reason to. He's already wearing pink jersey, and at this point in time, Team Ineos have looked solid throughout this stage 16. In fact, they look spectacular because they got most of their team together. Now, when they go through the next valley, as the group of GC favorites behind is incredibly small, it's Team Ineos on the front, and Astana rider gets on the front and starts setting tempo to try to hold the original break up front to a closer distance before they start this 5-kilometer super steep climb that's not even categorized. When this climb starts, Koen Bouwman, the Jumbo-Visma rider, is going to be the first to get popped. That's going to leave a small group up front until Leonard Kamna throws in attack. He's going solo over this climb. Behind, it's Bahrain Victorious that got on the front. They still have 4 riders left in the front group of GC favorites, and now they're going hard on the pedals trying to bring back the favorites up front. And remember, Wout Poels is still in that front group. Now, when they crest the top of this climb, those riders are still chasing, and they got a chance still at winning here today's stage. Now, when they bomb down this descent, Leonard Kamna is doing a fabulous job. With the last climb getting ready to start, Santa Cristina with 18 kilometers to go. Leonard Kamna solo with 34 seconds on the group of 5 behind, and the peloton is at 3 minutes 15 seconds. Now, when they start this climb, we're going to see a little bit of games because it's going to be Wout Poels sitting on the back of the group. He's not too interested in working right now. We'll see him come through occasionally at the front, but basically soft pedaling because Bahrain Victorious are storming on the pedals in the back of the GC favorites. Now when we get in the meat of the climb with 13 kilometers to go, it's our Ensman DSM that throws an attack. Jan Hurt can't follow it directly, but he will find his way up to our Ensman's wheel. Hugh Carthy couldn't follow and dropped off the pace. Valverde dropped along with Hugh Carthy, and those two riders are struggling to bring back the three up front. Now the two riders in between, Hurt and our Ensman, they're doing a fabulous job, and they'll bring back Bora Hansgrohe's Leonard Kamna up front. Now with three up front, it's going to be our Ensman that throws in a big attack. Jan Hurt, he does a great job of covering the attack, and then he throws in his own attack. He's got a gap on the DSM rider, our Ensman, with Leonard Kamna just gapped off behind. The three riders are all solo going up this climb. Back just behind, it's going to be Hugh Carthy that drops Alejandro Valverde. Now, all these guys are all solo chasing each other up this last and final climb here on stage 16. Behind in the GC favorites, it's Bahrain Victorious, and they have a crash. It's Pello Bilbao and Landa that connect with each other. Pello Bilbao goes down on the ground, but he gets up quick, looks back at the fans, and starts yelling, push. He's got three spectators giving him a massive push, and then he gets back up to the group of favorites and starts working for Bahrain Victorious. Wout Poels dropped out of the front group. Now he's back in the peloton. He'll do one big, massive pull back there, and that will set up Mikel Landa's attack. Mikel Landa accelerates hard on the pedals. Jai Hindley's following. Carapaz is following. Almeida, the UAE team Emirates riders, gapped off and pulling on the front. Now, this is why I brought up the jerseys, guys. Okay, Formula, who spent a lot of time in the breakup there and then blew his legs up to pieces throughout all these earlier stages at the Giro, and then again on today's stage. At this crucial moment, we're seeing Almeida back there with no help at all, again in the wind, chasing the three GC leaders up front. Now, he's chasing as hard as he can, but he can't close the gap because Carapaz is taking big pulls. Jai Hindley from Bora Hansgrohe, who's been spectacular here on every mountain stage of the Giro d'Italia, is taking big-time pulls. Mikel Landa, he's in for it because he's got the most to gain in this group, so he's doing big pulls. Up front, when they go over the KOM, it's going to be Hertz, the Intermarché rider, bombing down the descent with a 16-second gap on our Ensman from DSM. Now, if the road starts to get wet and dangerous, it's a technical descent. It's narrow, it's twisty, it's curvy, and up front, Intermarché's Hurt. He's got to be panicking at this point in time. Now, I remember going over the Angliru stage in the Vuelta when I won in 2013. It was Vincenzo Nibali just chasing me a few seconds behind. It was wet, it was foggy, you couldn't see anything, and you had to not panic. Up front, Hurt today in today's stage of the Giro. He's got to stay calm. He's got to go fast, but he's got to stay calm. He almost loses it with about 3.5 kilometers to go. Keeps his bike upright with 900 meters to go. When he comes out of the corner, the road's going to start coming up, and at 800 meters to go, our Ensman is in the picture. He's less than 10 seconds behind, and we just started the final little climb to the finish here on stage 16 of the Giro. Jan Hertz will look back once, he'll look back twice, he'll accelerate on the pedals and take another win here at stage 16 for Intermarché, the small little European team who's winning big time throughout this Giro and basically throughout this whole season. Intermarché have been fantastic. DSM will come through at second on the stage, about 10 seconds back for our Ensman. Behind those two, third on the stage will be Jai Hindley, who takes the time bonuses and moves up closer on Richard Carapaz. Now, just further off the picture, about 14 seconds, if I remember correctly, from the lead three group of GC favorites is going to be Almeida. Almeida, the UAE team Emirates rider, was fantastic on today's stage, chasing solo all the way up the last climb down the descent and minimizes the damage again on this monster stage of a climb to just 14 seconds loss to the GC favorites up front. He'll still hold a podium position, third place, when this stage finishes. Carapaz keeps the jersey, but now his gap is all the way down to just 3 seconds to Jai Hindley from Bora Hansgrohe. Vivo, who had a crash on one of the descents, he'll come into the stage and lose some GC positions because Vincenzo Nibali will move up higher in the general classification for Astana. Now, today was a spectacular day, and my storytelling was miserable here because there was so much action going on. So you guys got to go back and watch 202 kilometers if you really want to appreciate today's stage 16 of the Giro. It's going to be an exciting stage. We got another big day tomorrow on stage 17. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next edition.